Hello everyone, my name is Ben and I'm here to help you relax and drift off to sleep. Before we begin tonight's story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? It's always so wonderful to see where our cozy community is tuning in from. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. Story 2. The Tea Witch's Journal. Autumn deepened in Clover Hollow. Leaves swirled in crimson and gold through the village lanes, gathering in soft drifts beside the ivy-clad stones. Tucked behind the old clock tower, beneath cascading vines of honeysuckle and moss, stood the moss and ivy tea room. Its windows glowed with soft light. The air within was rich with the scent of steeped herbs, honeyed citrus, and warm oak smoke. Elowen Greaves, the tea room's keeper, moved gracefully among the tables, her dark green skirts trailing like forest shadows, copper hair pinned loosely with sprigs of thyme. On this particular afternoon, a gathering of familiar faces had arrived. Beatrix Lane sat by the corner window, her shawl folded neatly, eyes bright with curiosity. Mira Everwood leaned close beside her, a small basket of fresh rose hips and violet leaves at her side. Arthur Quill, ever the seeker of stories, sat with a worn leather journal and a twinkle in his eye. Elowen approached with a tray of steaming cups. Your usual Beatrix, chamomile vanilla with a touch of elderflower. For Mira, wild mint meadow honey. And Arthur, she smiled, setting a deep amber brew before him. Your seafarer's blend. No storm today, but one must be prepared. They shared quiet laughter. As they sipped, Elowen lingered. Strange tidings this week, she said softly, gaze drifting toward a small velvet-bound volume behind the counter. The Tea Witch's Journal. It had appeared in the tea room 3 nights past, resting atop a basket of dried lavender and lemon balm. No one had seen who left it. It bears recipes I've never known, and some pages seem to change. Beatrix's gaze sharpened. Arthur leaned forward. A story within a story, perhaps. Mira's eyes gleamed. May we see it? Elowen hesitated, then smiled. Of course, but be warned, not every blend is meant to be brewed lightly. And so, beneath vines and flickering lanterns, another Clover Hollow tale was about to begin. The tea room had grown quiet, the hum of conversation softening as afternoon light filtered through lace-strapped windows. Elowen Greaves moved behind the counter, her movements graceful as always. From beneath a stack of dried rose petals and lavender sachets, she lifted the velvet-bound book. The Tea Witch's Journal. Its cover was deep green, the shade of moss in shadow, edged in gold leaf. Across the center twined a faint pattern of ivy and crescent moons. Elowen carried it carefully to their table. Beatrix Lane adjusted her spectacles, eyes alight with curiosity. Arthur Quill leaned forward, fingers steepled. Mira Everwood reached out, then paused, sensing something unspoken within the book's quiet weight. Elowen opened the first page. In a hand both elegant and unfamiliar, the inscription read, "To those who brew with care, these pages will reveal what is sought, and conceal what is not yet ready to be known." The following pages held recipes, some familiar, some strange. Star Petal Sleep Tea, a blend said to soften the mind and invite gentle dreams. Heart Leaf Comfort Brew, to ease grief and kindle small joys. Mistwood Tonic, for clarity and patience. Yet as Elowen turned each page, the words seemed to shimmer faintly, as if written in light rather than ink. Arthur whispered, "A living book, perhaps." Beatrix nodded, eyes thoughtful. Mira tilted her head. "Look," she said softly. In the margin of one page, new text was appearing. Delicate script unfurling like vines for one who seeks solace in changing days. A tea of autumn's heart must be prepared. Beneath it, a recipe began to form. Autumn heart blend, cinnamon bark, dried apple marigold petals, wild clover honey, a single sprig of thyme gathered under first frost. The four exchanged glances. Elowen smiled slowly. "It would seem the journal has chosen to speak, and perhaps this is a blend that wishes to be brewed." Arthur's eyes twinkled. "Then let us brew it well, for all stories begin best with a shared cup." And so, beneath hanging ivy and lantern light, their gentle quest began, one of tea, quiet magic, and new wonder in Clover Hollow. Elowen Greaves traced the newly written recipe with a fingertip, eyes thoughtful. "A tea of autumn's heart," she murmured softly. Beatrix Lane smiled. "The journal seems to know this season well." Arthur Quill leaned back in his chair. "Or perhaps it listens to more than leaves and wind. Perhaps it listens to us." Mira Everwood rose eagerly. "Shall we gather the blend?" Elowen nodded, rising with quiet grace. "Come then, we'll gather what we can here, and the rest from the garden." From polished jars along the tea-room shelves she retrieved slender curls of cinnamon bark, slices of dried apple, sweet and crisp, delicate marigold petals, bright as captured sunlight. Each ingredient was placed carefully into a wide ceramic bowl. "And now the time," Mira said softly. Beatrix glanced toward the window. "First frost arrived only 2 nights ago," she said. "There will be time enough in the herb bed." Together they stepped into the garden behind the tea-room. The air was crisp and fragrant with earth and moss. Ivy twined thick along the stone walls. Clusters of violet and chamomile nodded beneath fading blooms. At the edge of a small patch of silver thyme, its leaves kissed with the faintest trace of frost, Mira knelt. She whispered a soft word of thanks, as taught in her herbalist training, and clipped a single sprig. "The last needed piece," she said, rising. Back inside they returned to the wooden counter. The tea-room was still and warm, lit by the soft glow of lanterns. Elowen laid the ingredients out with gentle precision. "We will brew this with care," she said quietly, "for no blend offered by this journal should be prepared without respect." The kettle sang low and steady. Steam curled into the air, scented faintly with clover and spice. One by one, Elowen added each element to the teapot: the apples and cinnamon, the marigold petals, the wild clover honey. At last, with a small smile, Mira placed the sprig of thyme atop the blend. Elowen poured the boiling water slowly, watching as colours bloomed within the pot: deep amber, gold, and faint hints of green. For a moment the air seemed to shift, a subtle warmth spreading through the room. Arthur's eyes twinkled. "A story in every cup," he said softly, and as the tea steeped, they waited, breaths slow, hearts light, beneath the watchful presence of the tea witch's journal, its pages quietly shimmering beneath the lantern light. Steam drifted lazily from the porcelain teapot, curling into the warm air of the moss and ivy tea-room. Elowen Greaves lifted the lid slowly. The blend had steeped to a rich amber hue, touched with flecks of gold from the marigold petals. "It is ready," she said softly. From the high shelf above, She retrieved 4 delicate cups, bone china etched with faint ivy vines. One by one she poured. The tea shimmered as it flowed, the scent warm and layered, cinnamon and apple, honey and herb, with an undertone of something more elusive, like the faint breath of an autumn breeze through ancient trees. Beatrix Lane cradled her cup, eyes closing briefly. "Like a walk beneath turning leaves," she whispered. Arthur Quill inhaled the steam, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. "Memory in a cup," he murmured. Mira Everwood sipped first, eyes widening faintly. "It feels gentle, but deep, as if it knows something of us." The others followed. As the tea touched their tongues, each felt a subtle warmth unfold, not merely across the palate, but deep within. Beatrix found herself remembering long ago autumns. Afternoons spent beneath the old oak in the library garden, lost in stories and sunlight. Arthur's thoughts drifted to his first voyage, the crisp salt air mingling with the scent of orchard apples packed in crates below deck. Mira glimpsed her mother's old garden, the herbs gathered with small hands beneath a sky of gold. For a moment each sat in quiet reverie, the tea weaving gentle threads through memory and heart, and then, as the last sip was taken, the tea witch's journal shimmered once more. A single line of text appeared upon its open page. "Blends of the heart may awaken what is kept in quiet corners. To brew is to listen, and to listen is to remember." Beatrix traced the words softly. "It seems this was no ordinary blend," she said. Elowen smiled, eyes thoughtful. "No tea is, when steeped with care." Outside the wind stirred through ivy leaves, and within the tea room, beneath hanging herbs and golden light, the story was just beginning to unfold. For a long moment the 4 sat in gentle silence. Only the soft ticking of the tea room's old wall clock and the faint rustle of ivy at the window filled the air. The autumn heart blend lingered warmly within them, not heavy, but light and steady, like a thread of music barely heard. Beatrix Lane gazed into her empty cup. "It has been long since I thought of those days beneath the oak," she said softly. "Yet here they are again, as vivid as the morning sun." Arthur Quill smiled faintly. "Such is the power of leaf and time. A good tea does not merely warm the body, but stirs the corners we often leave untouched." Mira Everwood traced the rim of her cup. "I wonder if this blend chose us," she said quietly. At that, a soft shimmer flickered across the open page of the tea witch's journal. New text unfurled beneath the prior line. "When the autumn heart is brewed, the path to the heart of memory may open. Seek the place where leaves fall in still water, and listen well." Arthur's brows lifted. "The heart of memory," he murmured. "Now that is a tale I've not heard before." Beatrix leaned closer. "It speaks of a place and a path." Elowen Greaves closed the journal with careful fingers. "It seems this blend has awakened more than simple recollection," she said softly. "Some wishes, some memories, seek to be known again." The room grew still. Outside a single leaf drifted past the window, red as embers, to land in a shallow basin of rainwater below. Mira's gaze followed it. "Leaves fall in still water," she whispered. "The journal speaks true." Arthur chuckled softly. "It seems we have our next step," he said. Beatrix rose with quiet purpose. "Then let us follow where this story leads, gently, as all good stories should." Elowen smiled. "And when you return," she said, The kettle will be ready once more. With hearts stirred and curiosity alight, the three gathered their cloaks, the tea-witch's journal tucked safely beneath Beatrix's arm, and beneath the turning leaves of Clover Hollow, another thread of magic began to unfurl. The late afternoon sun cast long beams of amber light across the cobbled lanes of Clover Hollow. Beatrix Lane, Arthur Quill, and Mira Everwood stepped out of the moss and ivy tea-room, their cloaks drawn close against the crisp air. Beneath Beatrix's arm, the tea-witch's journal rested, its velvet cover faintly warm to the touch. Around them, the village hummed softly with life. Shutters painted for winter were being closed. Baskets of last apples were carried through the square. The gentle chime of the clock tower marked the hour. "Where shall we begin?" Mira asked quietly. Beatrix opened the journal once more. The shimmering text remained. "Seek the place where leaves fall in still water, and listen well." Arthur smiled. "Then to the river, I think. The old bend near Winding Fern Bridge. It gathers leaves as if keeping their secrets." They turned toward the eastern lane, following a path lined with old stone walls overgrown with trailing ivy. As they walked, the scent of damp earth and wood smoke filled the air. Crows called softly from distant branches. By the time they reached Winding Fern Bridge, the sun had dipped low, painting the river in hues of gold and deep green. Beneath the arch of the stone bridge the water stilled. A natural eddy had formed along the bank, a small mirror-like pool where leaves floated in gentle spirals. There it was, leaves in still water. Beatrix smiled softly. "This is the place." Arthur leaned on his walking stick, gaze thoughtful. "It listens," as the journal said. Mira knelt beside the water's edge, fingertips brushing a single crimson leaf drifting slowly across the surface. "And so do we," she whispered. For a moment they stood in silence, letting the place speak in its own quiet way. Then, as if answering their patient hearts, the tea-witch's journal shimmered once more. New text appeared beneath the last. "Here the memory rests. Speak aloud what the heart would keep or release, and the river shall remember." Arthur's eyes twinkled. A chance, perhaps, to let go or to give thanks. And so, in the soft hush of Clover Hollow's river bend, beneath drifting leaves and fading light, they prepared to speak. The air had grown still beside the river. No breeze stirred the crimson and gold leaves drifting upon the water's surface. The sound of the village seemed distant now, softened beneath the hush of Winding Fern Bridge. Beatrix Lane, Arthur Quill, and Mira Everwood stood quietly, each gazing into the small mirrored pool. The tea-witch's journal shimmered softly beneath Beatrix's hand. "Speak aloud what the heart would keep or release, and the river shall remember." Arthur cleared his throat gently. "Perhaps I'll go first," he said, voice low. He stepped closer to the water, leaning on his worn walking stick. "I carry a story unfinished," he said, "of a voyage once begun, but never written through to its end. Today I give thanks for the journey that was, and release the regret for what was left unwritten." A small leaf drifted beneath his reflection, a single turn of gold. The water shimmered faintly, not bright, not loud, but as if the river had listened and understood. Arthur stepped back with a soft smile. Mira Everwood knelt next. "I miss my mother's garden," she whispered. Each autumn she would gather the last herbs beneath the turning leaves. "I wish to remember the joy of those mornings without sadness." A crimson leaf curled toward her, floating in slow circles. She exhaled, eyes bright with both memory and release. At last, Beatrix Lane approached the water. "For many years," she said softly, "I have tended the library, a place of memory and voice. I ask only that I may listen well to the stories yet to come, and that Clover Hollow always remain a place of quiet wonder." A slender silver leaf touched the pool's center, sending gentle ripples outward. For a long breath, the three stood together, watching. The river shimmered once more, a soft, soundless pulse, then stilled. Beatrix closed the journal with reverence. "It is enough," she said softly. "It is," Arthur agreed. Mira smiled faintly. "I feel lighter." As twilight deepened, they turned from the river, their steps unhurried. Behind them, the leaves drifted still. But something unseen had shifted, and beneath the mirrored surface, the river remembered. Evening had settled softly over Clover Hollow. As Beatrix Lane, Arthur Quill, and Mira Everwood made their way back from Winding Fern Bridge, the first stars pricked the darkening sky. Lanterns glowed warmly in cottage windows. The scent of wood smoke and spiced cider drifted through the cool air. They walked without hurry, each wrapped in their own quiet reflections. "I wonder," Mira said softly, "if the river keeps its memories for always, or only until they are needed once more." Arthur smiled. "Both, perhaps. Stories, like rivers, flow where they must." Beatrix carried the Tea Witch's journal carefully beneath her arm. "And some stories," she said. "Know when to wait." As they reached the winding lane behind the old clock tower, the familiar glow of the moss and ivy tea room welcomed them home. Inside, the warmth embraced them. Elowen Greaves looked up from behind the counter, where she was arranging small bundles of lavender and rosemary. "You've returned," she said, eyes bright, and with lighter hearts, I think. Beatrix smiled. The journal led us true. They gathered once more at their familiar table, beneath hanging ivy and golden light. Elowen poured fresh tea, a gentle blend of chamomile, lemon balm, and violet leaf. As they sipped, Beatrix opened the journal one final time that evening. A single line now shimmered on its page. "The heart that listens well will brew what is needed, in its own time and its own way." Arthur nodded thoughtfully. "A lesson fit for tea and for life." Mira traced the words with a fingertip. "I think," she said softly, "this journal will offer many more such paths." "When we are ready," Beatrix closed the cover gently. "Then we will listen well." Outside, the wind stirred the ivy leaves. Within the tea room the lantern light glowed steady and soft, and beneath the velvet-bound cover of the Tea Witch's journal, new stories waited, patient as the turning of the year. The tea room had grown quieter still. Outside, the village lay beneath a sky of deep velvet blue, stars scattered like fine sugar. The flames in the hearth had settled to amber coals, their light dancing softly across the worn wood floor. Beatrix Lane, Arthur Quill, Mira Everwood, and Elowen Greaves lingered at their table. "Strange," Arthur said quietly, "how a simple blend of leaves can lead one to such places." "Not so strange," Elowen replied with a smile, "for herbs and water are vessels for memory, and memory is the oldest kind of magic we know." Mira sipped slowly. "I wonder what other blends the journal holds," she mused. "And which stories we are ready to find," Beatrix added softly. Elowen glanced toward the velvet-bound book, its cover faintly luminous beneath the soft lantern light. "The journal offers its pages in its own time," she said. "No more, no less." As if in gentle agreement, a soft hum rose from the closed book. Not a sound to be heard with the ear, but one felt beneath the heart. Arthur smiled knowingly. "It remembers we are listening," he said. The four sat together in contented silence. At last the hour grew late. Mira rose, wrapping her cloak about her shoulders. "Thank you," she said softly, "for tea and for memory." "For both are best when shared," Elowen replied, embracing her gently. Arthur took up his walking stick, offering Beatrix his arm. "Shall we, Miss Lane?" Beatrix smiled. "Yes, for I think the lanterns along the lane will seem brighter tonight." As they stepped into the cool night, Elowen watched from the doorway, a soft smile lingering on her lips. She glanced once more toward the journal. "Thank you," she whispered. The book shimmered faintly, then settled, as if content. Outside, beneath the stars, the friends walked slowly home, and beneath ivy and stone, in the heart of the tea-room, the tea witch's journal rested, its pages alive with the promise of stories yet to be steeped. The village was hushed beneath the stars. Mira Everwood walked slowly along Wren Lane, her cloak drawn close, the crisp night air cool against her cheeks. Tiny lanterns glowed from iron posts, their light spilling in soft pools across the cobbled path. Above, the sky stretched wide, a tapestry of deep indigo and scattered stars. Mira's footsteps echoed faintly as she passed the familiar fronts of shuttered shops and ivy-draped cottages. The scent of wood smoke drifted on the breeze, mingled with hints of rosemary and damp leaves. In her heart, the memory of the evening remained warm, the tea's gentle comfort, the river's quiet shimmer, the shared words beside the still water. Some stories, she thought, we choose to tell, others choose us. As she reached her small garden gate, a silver bell above the latch chimed softly. She paused, glancing up at the stars once more. "Thank you," she whispered, to the river, to the journal, to the unseen currents of the village that wove its stories with such care. The wind stirred the leaves overhead. As if in quiet reply, Mira stepped inside her cottage, a small space lined with herb-drying racks, books well loved, and a worn armchair by the hearth. The embers still glowed softly, casting long shadows. She set her basket aside, the lingering scent of rose hips and thyme sweet in the air. At the window, a slender ivy vine twined toward the latch, a familiar companion. "Good night," she whispered, brushing its leaves lightly. Beyond the glass, the village lanterns flickered, small beacons of warmth in the deepening night, and as Mira settled beneath her patchwork quilt, eyes growing heavy, she knew the tea witch's journal would not be still for long. Stories waited in pages yet unopened, in leaves not yet gathered, in hearts not yet ready. But for now there was peace, and beneath the stars of Clover Hollow the village dreamed. The hour had grown late. Elowen Greaves moved softly through the empty moss and ivy tea-room, her steps quiet upon the worn wood floor. The lanterns had been dimmed, the fire in the hearth had faded to a faint crimson glow. She gathered the empty teacups, setting them gently upon a silver tray. The room smelled faintly of wild honey, lavender, and the last traces of the autumn heart blend. At the centre of the room, upon its low table, rested the tea witch's journal, closed, yet softly humming beneath its velvet cover. Elowen paused beside it. "You still have more to say, don't you?" she whispered. The book shimmered faintly, a pulse of gentle light. Smiling, Elowen seated herself, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the cover. "Another page, then, before we rest?" She opened the journal slowly. For a moment the pages remained still. Then, upon the first open leaf, a new line of text unfurled. Soft as a sigh, brew for those who seek, listen for those who wander. The next leaf turns when the time is kind. Elowen read the words aloud, voice low, "And so we shall wait, with kettle ready." She closed the journal gently, laying a slender sprig of thyme across its cover. The room held its breath, a quiet filled not with emptiness, but with a sense of stories still to come. Elowen rose, her movements slow and sure. She banked the fire, drew the velvet curtains, and turned the last of the lanterns low. By the door she paused, glancing once more at the table where the journal rested, its glow soft and steady in the dark. "Good night, old friend," she whispered. Outside, beneath a sky of silver stars, Clover Hollow slept, and in the heart of the tea-room, within pages alive with memory, new stories waited, patient as the turning leaf. Outside the moss and ivy tea-room, the streets of Clover Hollow lay quiet beneath a blanket of stars. Lanterns flickered softly in their iron posts, their light casting long golden reflections across the damp cobblestones. From high within the tower of the old library, a single bell rang the hour, its chime low and gentle, as if unwilling to disturb the night. Along the banks of the winding fern river, leaves gathered in slow spirals, their colours deepening beneath the starlight, and above it all, the village seemed to breathe with a quiet rhythm, as if the stones and trees and water all listened to the stories whispered through its winding lanes. Within the tea-room, the last lantern had dimmed. On the low table, the tea witch's journal rested beneath its sprig of thyme, the faintest glow still shimmering along its edges. The book seemed to hum with a slow, steady pulse. Not a sound to wake, but a presence to soothe. Brew for those who seek, listen for those who wander. Outside, a gentle wind stirred the ivy along the tea-room's eaves, leaves rustling like soft words carried through the dark. And throughout Clover Hollow, dreams began to stir. In Mira's cottage, a soft smile touched her lips as she slept, the memory of rose-scented mornings lingering in her heart. In Beatrix's rooms above the library, a faint light glowed from beneath the closed door. A story begun anew. In Arthur's study, a quill rested beside a blank page, awaiting the words of an unfinished tale, and through it all, the tea witch's journal waited, as it always had, as it always would, beneath turning leaves and ancient stone, ready for the next story to steep. So too does Clover Hollow wait. Beneath the stars, beneath the ivy, a village of quiet wonder and gentle magic, where every leaf, every cup, every whispered word holds the beginning of another tale. And now, dear listener, rest easy. The kettle will be ready when you return. Good night. And so we close the pages of tonight's tale. The tea-room grows quiet once more, and the lanterns of Clover Hollow flicker softly beneath the stars. Thank you for joining me on this gentle journey. May your dreams be warm and kind, and may the stories linger just beneath your heart as you rest. Until next time, good night.